Good morning. Today is the 20th day of Kislev, the 3rd of December. We're starting a new parsha, Parashat Vayeishev, which means he lived in. Jacob lived or settled in the region where his father had lived, Isaac. And we begin to hear about his descendants and his actions. And there are two ways of looking at these, at the next parsha. It could be that, if you remember, we divided the book of Genesis up into five parts. We said the first two parashot, the first two readings, the first two portions, Genesis, Bereshit and Noach, are dedicated to humanity before Abraham. Then we have two parashot, two portions about Abraham, then two about Isaac, two about Jacob. And now we have four left. There's altogether 12. So we've done 8 already. Now we're in the last 4. And one way of looking at the last 4 is either that there's actually 3 for Jacob and 3 for Joseph, or the way that it's more commonly seen is that we already finished Jacob's story, and now we're moving on to Joseph. And indeed, the second verse already tells us these are the descendants of Jacob. And immediately it tells us Joseph was 17 years old and was pasturing the flocks with his brothers. He was a young boy, and so on. So immediately it turns into a description of Joseph's life. It starts off very problematic. And there are two different ways of reading this. One is that this is a tale of jealousy. And where does jealousy between brothers come from? And if you remember, I've talked about this in the past, that in the Bible, the issue is usually between men or people of the same generation. That the strife, the conflict, is between people of the same generation, whereas non-Jewish works, especially those that are mythological, those that try to give a picture of what humanity is like, will usually identify the strife and difficulty, the opposition between generations. So again, in the Torah, it's usually intragenerational, meaning it's about what happens within the generation itself. So we've seen Jacob and Esau, that was our topic last week. We've seen Isaac and Ishmael. We've seen Abraham and Lot. Also, we've seen Cain and Abel. We've seen many examples of this happening. People of the same generation. Not so much between the generations themselves. And now we have the greatest dispute of all, the greatest conflict of all, which is now going to take us at least 3 Torah portions to resolve the dispute between Joseph and his brothers, the tribes. And so that's one way of looking at these few portions. It's trying to understand what was going on between them, and this will come in and out of our discussions. This conflict between them. Why is there a conflict in the first place? Where did it come from? The other way of looking at this, which is the way I usually teach it, and it's how I taught it in Los Angeles, or started teaching it, I don't think we really had time to cover it, is why Joseph is the example of a person who figures out what his mission in life is and pursues it, and what obstacles he's able to overcome by following a certain plan. We call this plan the 4 stages that Chassidus talks about, that Kabbalah talks about, and that Rav Ginsburg develops fully. Is that first there is a vision of faith, then there is will to perform that vision, then there comes intellectual success, an ability to solve problems that nobody has solved before because of the need to fulfill this vision, this mission. And finally, in the end, there is the opening the eyes and seeing that the vision has been completed, and that even though it may be not so easy to recognize, you are there. You are where you wanted to be. So these are 2 separate ways of explaining these portions, and I'm going to weave them in and out as we go along. Today I want to start with the conflict. And the conflict is one of jealousy. The first portion ends with the words, Joseph's brothers were jealous of him, but his father waited expectantly for the matter to take place. Joseph had these dreams. This is his vision. He's going to be a king. We don't yet know what kind of king. Why does he want to be a king? But those were all his visions or his dreams tell him. His father waits to see what will happen with it, but his brothers are in conflict with him over it, and they are jealous of him. Now, if you read through the first portion, you'll see that the jealousy came after hatred. There's actually 3 different times in the first portion that we hear that they hate him. And why do they hate him? They hated him because it seems that Jacob made the classic mistake, which is to prefer him over his siblings. And I don't know if you know this. I'm sure everyone knows of something like this. There are many examples of this right now as we speak, as we live. There are examples of families that are torn apart by a will written by a father who had no sense in his mind. And there wasn't anybody there to tell him, do not play favorites with your children. It's not about just between them. It's also between you and them, because they will learn to hate you in the end if you don't keep things equal. And it doesn't matter if you have someone who's your favorite or not. It has nothing to do with anything. We have to increase peace in the world, not ruin it. And so that's one of the first things that needs to happen. But there was a class that Rav Ginsburg gave many years ago, and I remember that when I heard this class, it really was a cathartic class for me. And he taught a very simple idea. It's that we all have different talents. What Jacob was trying to show was that by playing favorites with Joseph, what Jacob was trying to show was that Joseph had different talents. He was talented in ways that they weren't. And we'll get back to this, but in a nutshell, Joseph was a man of the world. Joseph was someone who could go out into the world and change it. He knew the language. He understood people. The brothers, all his other brothers, were not men of the world. They were shepherds. They lived a very confined and limited life. If you want an example of this, this would be, again, I don't want to say that it's the same thing exactly, but today we have maybe 10% of Jewish people in the world that are what we would call ultra-Orthodox, and they are not intent in participating in the world. They're actually intent in sequestering themselves off and living piously. They don't have the ability to be able to act any other way. And people have to understand this. And instead of fighting with one another and saying, why are you not doing your part and so on, why are you so sequestered, why are you so cut off from everything, understand that people have different abilities. And the way that they see their abilities after taking looking at themselves long and hard, and they take this from their parents also, is that they don't have what it takes to go out there. On the other hand, there's an organization, a Chassidus called Chabad, and today is what we call the Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus, the 20th, the 19th and 20th of Kislev, these 2 days. And in our generation, the Lubavitcher Rebbe took Lubavitch out of that sequestered state and said, your role is like Joseph's role. You have to go out and change the world. And I know that you don't think you have the talents yet, but I'm telling you, when you get out there, you will. You'll be able to do this. So Chabad is like the Joseph of this generation. And it can lead to a lot of hatred and jealousy. The jealousy comes from hatred, and this was the crux of Rav Ginsburg's class, maybe 15 years ago, I don't remember exactly when it was, where he said that in the end what we're jealous of is that someone else has more success than we do. That's what it's about. It's not about the talents. It's not about whether he's more talented or less talented. In the end, it's about the bottom line. So what does he have and I don't have? And he said that there is one and only one real remedy for that. and it's called, what in America is called industriousness. It's being someone who's diligent, someone who applies himself to his work. And it says there's a very interesting concept in Judaism that success is not relative to where you work, it's relative to how much you apply yourself to what you work at. A person can be doing very simple things, and I know people like this, who literally have a little shop where they sell candy, and they own 10 apartments in Israel. Now, if you understand what it means to own 10 apartments in Israel, that's like owning 50 apartments in any major city except for Los Angeles and New York in the United States. And people get to that because it's about diligence, it's about industriousness. It's not necessarily at all about what talents you have. And when you look at someone else and you say, he's much more successful at teaching Torah, like I'm taking my business for instance. He teaches Torah, he has thousands and thousands and thousands of students all over. And I look at him and I say, but I know so much more. Rav Ginsburg says very simply, that's jealousy. And jealousy can only be remedied when you decide to apply yourself. When you come and you say, it doesn't matter to me what anyone else has, because I know that I am doing all that I can. Yourself. The moment that you become industrious, the moment that you take on your mission in life, you can become just as successful. It doesn't matter at all if you have less talents, more talents. These things don't matter at all. And it doesn't even matter in what area of life you are applying yourself. As long as you're doing it diligently, and in a certain sense, I would say that this is almost the crux of what the American dream is about. The American dream, at least used to be, I hope some people still believe in it, because it is a staple of Jewish thought that when you apply yourself, you will achieve your dreams. So Joseph could achieve his dreams, the tribes could achieve their dreams, Jacob could, everyone can, because the world is not a zero-sum game. That's the big mistake. A zero-sum game means that in the end, there has to be 1 plus minus 1 equals 0. If I have 1, somebody can't have 1. Somebody has a negative 1. If I have 2, somebody has to have negative 1 and negative 1. There have to be 2 other people who have less. It's not true. God is infinite. And the world is only a stage on which our endeavors are manifested. And the moment that a person is industrious, it's not a zero-sum game. There can be 1 here and 2 here and 8 here and 50 here, and they have no connection to one another. This is known in the Talmud as one kingdom does not touch the borders of another. Each person is a separate kingdom in this world, and therefore each person has the ability to fulfill his dreams fully without being at the expense of someone else. So with that, we'll end today. I'm sorry I can't take any questions if there are, but I have to leave.
No, I got 2. We got 2.